Hi, welcome to the next chapter on the Gukesh Qgd, where we'll be starting out with the sidelines and covering the not so important but good to have a look at setups. Till now, we have checked the main lines after d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, takes, bishop g5, bishop b4, and we had checked out e3, h6, bishop g4, g5, bishop g3, knight e4. This is the starting point of the Gukesh Qgd and the most important position by far. We saw knight g2, we saw queen c2, and some other sidelines. Now we'll check white sidelines from this moment onwards. So in this chapter, we'll be looking at setups with queen a4 check. This includes 6th e3 as well as direct queen a4 check. What I have tried to do is have similar kind of positions in one chapter rather than arranging it through the move order way so that it's easier to remember and makes it viable to memorize certain kinds of plans. We'll start with direct queen a4 check and then we'll move on to 6th e3. With queen a4 check, what white is claiming is that after knight c6, our knight is a bit misplaced. And this is a typical idea used in Ragozin as well. Actually, this position in fact converts to one of the sidelines in Ragozin. And White's claim is that our knight on c6 is a bit misplaced and we won't be able to challenge the center with c5 anytime soon. But a very important but is that White has played c into d5, which actually, okay, let's compare it with a traditional Ragozin with queen a4 check. And now the key point of differentiation, there is a main line with bishop g5 here, but the key point which is in our favor and is different from Ragozin is that white has committed to c into d5. Because of this, white has lost a bit space in the center and it makes it viable for us to play this position. So when we reach it with our move order, d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, cd, ed, bishop g5, bishop b4, queen a4 check, knight c6, not only we have equal space in the center, but our bishop can be developed to a better square on that diagonal. And because of this, this line is not threatening for us. Now let's just check the moves instead of the underlying strategy. So white has knight f3 here and white has e3 here. This is the main move order and the strongest one too. If white plays knight f3, we harass the g5 bishop in the typical fashion with h6. White now has bishop g4, which is a bit slow and gives us the typical and natural g5, bishop g3, knight e4, where we are already better due to the initiative. White's g5 bishop is very bad and we have ideas of h5, h4 as well as taking on c3. So white needs to probably play bishop into f6 and we play queen f6, get our queen in, where after e3, we'll transpose to the mainland. If white plays e3 here, we still play h6 and after bishop f6, queen f6, we transpose back to the main line with 6th e3. So let's go to 6th e3. We play h6 nevertheless. We want to harass the bishop. And now bishop into f6. This is the starting point of those queen a4 line ideas where white has to give up the bishop pair. But in return, after queen f6, white plays queen a4 check. And we have to lodge our knight on c6. Now, what are the strategic implications of this particular move order? We have won the bishop pair, but this knight is a bit misplaced. The pawn on d5 is also slightly weak, so we can't move back with the bishop as white would have knight d5. But these pieces on the king side are undeveloped, while we can castle in one move. So we have a slightly safer king as well, and our queen is very well placed to harass white's king if white tries to castle. So there are lines where white plays knight f3 and bishop e2, but we have queen g6 and white can't castle due to threats of bishop h3. So basically, white has some issues on the king side. We have two kind of ideas here. One is to castle and attack white's king side, or else we want to just play bishop e6, bishop d6, knight e7, and start attacking with g5, preventing knight b5 once, something with something like a6. These are the two critical type of ideas which we have. Let's start with white's main sideline, bishop b5. The idea is obvious. White wants to play bishop into c6 or queen b4 and win some material. We finish our kingside development and castle. We are not bothered about bishop into c6, and we'll see why this is not a good move. But let's start with knight g2. What is white's idea? White says that if we take on c3, white wants to take back with the knight and does not want to spoil the pawn structure on the queen side. The drawback is that white is a move slow and cannot win our bishop. So we bring our bishop to the best square, the d6 square. From d6, it directly eyes the h2 pawn, which will be vulnerable once white castles. And if we get this particular setup with bishop to e6 and knight to e7, we have a very good positions because we'll play something like a6 or c6, stop all knight b5 ideas, and then start marching on the king side. White doesn't have enough attack on the queen side, and we'll be able to hold our fort there and destroy white on the king side. So white, after bishop d6, white has two critical moves. There is bishop c6, and then there is knight d5. If white castles, we just get knight e7, and then we either want to play c6 or we want to play bishop e6. And basically, we have the typical setup we want. So let's start with bishop into c6. White wins the knight, so we are obliged to take it back. And the only way it makes sense for white is to play queen c6. Otherwise, we have the pair of bishops in the position, in an open position, and white's king is still in the center. So white takes on c6. What do? We bring one of our inactive pieces into the game and threaten to jump in onto the 7th rank with rook into b2. Now white has only one good move, that is knight d5. If white tries to defend the pawn with b3, we start taking over with rook b6. And the problem for white is queen d5 is not possible due to bishop b7 and bishop g2, losing the important pawn, after which this king would not have a safe square to go to. And if white plays queen a4, we just play queen g6. And this is a very clever dual purpose move. Not only we are threatening queen into g2, but the idea is revealed that if white castles and defends the pawn and gets the king to a safe zone, we have rook a6, queen b5, c6. And now the point of queen g6 is revealed. The d3 square is covered, so white's queen is trapped and has no squares. And therefore, white cannot play this passive b3. In general, in openings, as we have already seen, you have to prioritize activity and development over a single pawn. So white probably needs to play knight d5 here. Okay, this time white wins the second pawn, but this just helps us to get our queen to a more active square on g5, where we are threatening queen into g2. And this position is not clear at all. White holds with h4, but basically from white's end, white is absolutely busted because your king cannot go to the king side, your king cannot go to the queen side. White holds tactically with h4, but from a practical viewpoint, this is already very dangerous. White just doesn't have the moves to finish the development with ease. There is h4, queen g6, and knight f4, which the computer recommends. But after queen g4, followed by bishop b7 or rook e8, this position just looks very scary for white. Computer thinks it's minus 0.1 for us, but from a practical viewpoint, we are making all the threats in the position, and we'll recover our material disadvantage sooner or later. I think that is good enough for this line. And if white plays knight, yeah. So let's go back. If white plays knight into d5 directly, we go queen g5. And the idea is same. We are creating a double attack of queen g5 and queen g2. If white plays knight f4, by the way, this is met with the same response. We firstly trade the knight due to a very tactical point that after knight f4, now we are a pawn down. So if white castles, white is good. But we have knight into d4 and we recover our pawn. White can't play e into d4 due to queen f4, where we stand better due to the better pawn structure. We are going to play rook d8 or c6, or just play bishop e6 and get our last piece into the game. And if white plays queen d4, now the secondary point of queen g5 is revealed, that we can play queen into b5, win a bishop, and basically stop white from castling. This pawn is weak too, and so I think black's position looks very good. And basically this was it for the sideline with bishop b5. If white plays knight f3, the most played move in this variation, white brings out a knight and just wants to finish the kingside development with bishop e2 or bishop d3. We castle, we finish our kingside development. Now there are two ideas for white which are critical. They are bishop e2 and rook c1. But there are a few sidelines with bishop b5 and a3 and bishop d3. Let's start with rook c1, the second most important move in the position. White wants to play a3 and meet bishop c3 with rook into c3. White doesn't want to spoil the pawn structure on the queen side and put pressure on the knight on c6 and our pawn on c7. Now we know that white's king is in the center and white wants to play bishop e2 in the next move. So we can play queen g6 and stop white from developing the bishop comfortably. If you're looking for a good alternative line and are okay to avoid such complications, bishop into c3 is the easiest equalizer. After rook c3, you can just play knight e7, with the tactical point being that rook into c7 is not possible due to knight c6, and the rook is trapped. You will win an exchange very soon. And if white doesn't do that and plays something like bishop e2, we can comfortably play c6 and get our knight to d6, which is the best square for knight in these Carlsbad structures. And so basically we won't have any problems in those minority attack lines because we will always have the access to the important c4 square. But I prefer complications and I want to play queen g6. The idea is obvious. We don't want to allow white to develop the bishop. Now white's main move is queen b3, which is basically to get the queen near the king and to play a3 next. Why can't white play a3 here? Due to bishop into c3, rook into c3, and the very surprising queen b1 check. We win a pawn on b2 and exploit that there is nothing defending the first rank for white. There is queen b3, which is interesting and was played by Temur Rajabov against the women's world champion Zhu Wenjun. But we just have rook d8, which was played by Wenjun as well. We bring out our rook, defend the pawn, and after a3, we play bishop f8, get the bishop to a safe square. Now knight into d5 is not possible due to the pin after bishop e6, where we win material. And if that's not the case, we want to play knight a5 and b6 next. Keep an eye on this weak square, and then we stand better due to the pair of bishops. This bishop might come to b7, but it might come to e6 as well. All of it depends on where and how white places their pieces. So let's go and check out the main line with queen d1. With queen d1, white now wants to play a3, where we can't play bishop c3 due to rook c3. What do? We just play knight e7. And now the secondary point of our system is revealed, that we want to play bishop e6, bishop d6, c6, stop all knight b5 ideas, and then play on the king side. But white can try to stop that with a3, because bishop d6 is met with knight b5, which we don't want to allow. So we play bishop a5, and now we want the same kind of ideas, but with c6 and bishop c7 included. If white doesn't allow us to do that, our second idea could be to play knight f5, knight d6, and put the knight on the most active square in these Carlsberg structures. From d6, the knight eyes the weaknesses on c4 and e4. Computer thinks this is equal objectively, but from a practical viewpoint, if we are able to finish our development, we stand better due to the pair of bishops. And this brings us an end to this sideline with rook c1, which is the second most important line here. If white plays bishop b5, threatening bishop c6, we can spoil white's pawn structure with bishop c3, and after bc3, play the typical knight e7, followed by c6, knight f5, knight d6, and eyeing for the c4 and e4 square. We stand slightly better due to white's queenside weaknesses. Also, we are very happy to exchange the light square bishop, as in all the traditional QGD lines. If white plays a3 here, this is bad, as we are very happy to spoil white's pawn structure. And after bc3, play the typical b6, preparing knight a5 and eyeing for this weakness on c4. So by now you would have observed that this b6 knight a5 attacking the c4 and c4 square is very typical, and also typical is this motif eyeing for this square. We are very happy to chop up these bishops, as this would then become very weak. Which brings us to bishop d3, the last sideline. The bishop is usually very well placed here, but right now it's not good because white allows us to play bishop g4, and we are very happy to trade off our worst placed piece in the QGD. Now white has two ideas. There is knight d2 and there is bishop e2. Bishop e2 is possible, but if you have to make a retreating move like that, white's position shouldn't be good. We play the natural a6, stop knight b5, so that after castle, we have the typical plan with bishop e6. White was threatening knight d5, so we need to start with bishop e6. And now we want to get our setup with bishop d6, knight e7, and start attacking on the king side with g5, knight g6, g4, and h5. So let's say white brings out the rook, we get our bishop back. Now the queen is not doing anything here. And after queen d1, we play knight e7. This is one of the most natural plans here, where we meet knight a4 with b6, and basically white has nothing to play against these queenside pawns, and we have everything to play for on the king side. We would like to open up the king side and make some threats there. This structure particularly is covered in great depth in the model game of Jan Verle and Gajewski. You can check out the model game sections if you want to learn more about this position. But in general, it's a very comfortable position for black, where you are just trying to gain space on the king side and make some threats, while white can't do anything on this side of the board. So let's go to knight d2, where white retreats. But this knight is very passive here, and we can actually just play queen g5, creating the cheap threat of meeting short castle with bishop h3. But even if that cheapo doesn't work, white's position is still bad because the king cannot go to a safe square, and we have the pair of bishops in an open position. So this just gives us a very comfortable position, and we go back and check the main line with castle bishop e2. White just develops a piece and basically prepares against bishop g4 and wants to castle next. Now white has developed all the three minor pieces, while we are yet to develop this bishop. So we play bishop e6 and develop our piece. We defend our pawn, and now we want to play bishop d6 next. By the way, I forgot to mention, after bishop d3, we may play bishop e6. It's possible, but this bishop is slightly active here. So with bishop g4, we wanted to force the bishop to go back and then get the same setup, so that the bishop on e2 is a bit more passive. While for bishop e2, since the bishop is already on a restricted square, we now play bishop e6. Now, we want to play the typical a6 bd6, and if white plays castle, a6 transposes to the line which we have already checked. So the only independent and the strongest move for white here is a3. Now we can't play bishop d6 due to the threat of knight b5, where white is trying to win the bishop pair and stop us from getting our positional goal with a6 and knight e7. So we need to spoil white's pawn structure with bishop c3. And after bc3, white has some obvious weaknesses here, but our knight is not very well placed. How do we deal with that? By playing knight e7 and getting our knight to a very active square. With knight e7, we are preparing knight c8 and knight d6 or b6, and as usual, trying to eye for the weak square on c4. We may also play c5 with rook f8 included after that to put pressure on the weakness on c3 and get our rook to an open file. And basically that's it for these bishop g5 and queen a4 lines. And just to sum it up, after bishop g5, bishop b4, e3, queen a4 check, knight c6 will just transpose to what we have already seen. e3, h6, takes queen a4, knight c6. Our key idea is just to get the bishop out, and ideally to e6, play a6 to stop knight b5, play bd6, castle, knight e7, and g5. Maybe it's better just to get rid of all of these arrows and explain the concepts again. So we want to develop this bishop to e6, play a6, play bd6, get this knight to e7 and push g5. This is our key plan. If we don't get that, we would play bishop c3, spoil white's pawn structure, and after bc3, play knight e7 and play knight c8 and put this knight on c6 or d6. Just a concrete line which you need to remember is that after knight f3, castle, rook c1, you play queen g6 and stop white from developing this bishop. That is all you need to have a good plan about, good understanding of these positions, and we have already checked out the concrete lines. All right, this ends the chapter, and I'll see you in the next chapter, where we continue with the sidelines of the Gukesh Qgd system.